Yay.
Hi, everyone. I feel so honored to be here again in this space, sharing this time with you and exploring Syntropy and with my friend Sovereign. Hey, Sovereign, I missed you.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a good long while.
Yeah, not too long, but a lot has happened. A lot of meaningful things have happened, and I'm excited to circle into this topic. So I just wanted to, as a reminder, since it's been a few weeks since our last conversation, I want to do a refresher on Syntropy and just keep it really simple. So Syntropy is a perspective that is guided by nature and powered by love. And if you haven't been able to tell already, Syntropy has really become my thing. And thanks to you, Sovereign. It's just looking through life through this lens of love is totally my thing. And it wasn't always, but I just find it fascinating and fulfilling to re-look at everything that I thought I knew through this beautiful lens. And so I'm inviting you, if love is your thing, if learning about life is your thing, if pursuing abundance and prosperity and cooperation and harmony, and for you and your family, if those are your things, then you are in exactly the right place. And I am honored to be here with you. And well, of course, guess who else finds Syntropy to be his thing? You, Sovereign, right? You're like our syntropic sage that I cherish, and I'm just so grateful to you for introducing me to this beautiful way of looking at life.
Yeah, it is a beautiful way of relating to the world around us and the world within us, the world within our thoughts, because that's how we relate to life predominantly. And it's just my experience. It's a beautiful way of engaging with reality from a place and a perspective that is, in a sense, felt way very new, but it feels refreshing, and it actually gives so many more answers that are so much more fulfilling. So yeah, today we're doing medicine.
Awesome. It's awesome. Okay, so here's what I want to do, Sovereign. I want to first lay out the plan for tonight, just so everyone is aware of what we're going to be talking about. And I'm going to do first a speed review of where we've traveled in our journey to explore society's stuff through Syntropy's lens. And then I plan to give a little background. I'm going to read some interesting medical history leading up to the current mainstream and alternative medical systems and paradigm, the one that we all are acquainted with, at least in this day and age. And throughout, I would love, Sovereign, for you to interject, just pop in and let me know if you have some thoughts so I can hear from you, your relationship with medicine, which is our topic that we're running through Syntropy tonight, or even any of the perspectives that I'm sharing. And then my favorite part of our discussion, I'd like to refer to nature and refer to nature's guidance to harmonize our exploration and to bring all of what we discuss through the lens of Syntropy. Does that sound good?
I mean,
oh, we're losing you a little bit. I feel like this would be really funny if one night this was like a drinking game. Like, how many times does Marissa say Syntropy? Take a drink. Let's not do that, or if you feel like it, you can. Am I losing you a bit, Sav?
I just switched over. The Wi-Fi seems to be a little bit challenged.
Oh, well, that's okay. Technical difficulties. We got kind of thrown off of Facebook, so that seems to be the theme tonight. But we're going to still dive right in. We're going to charge through. How's that for you?
Sounds good. Yay.
Okay.
Take it away.
All right, so let's just do a recap. So we've been on a journey so far, and we've started by pointing out the understanding that each of us within society as a whole has developed belief systems. And everything we observe and think and decide and act upon are influenced by the stories that represent these belief systems, and essentially our interpretation of how life works, and how it should go. So I have found that since everything I think I know, is a story, that I can choose what stories that feel good to me and what ones don't. And just because something is widely believed, or because I've believed something for a long time, does not make it absolute truth, which was incredibly freeing when I came upon that. So then that was our first talk. And then we went into applying this way of relating to society's perspectives. We explored illness, contagion, germs, and then the last conversation was about infection. And we compared the commonly held perspectives with evidence from nature. And what became clear, at least to me, is that everything that we think we know about these aspects of disease and health are almost entirely unnatural. So let me just hone in on that for a second and just kind of take in that idea that our whole way of relating to health and disease, or at least the commonly shared perspectives that we went over in our talks, they don't really hold up in nature, which is kind of crazy. So tonight we're going to continue this exploration to see whether our ideas and practices in various fields of medicine make sense through syntropy, through nature's lens. And as always, my goal is to share my own views. I personally believe, and this is plastered all over my website if you have gotten to visit marissalavin.com. So it's no secret that I believe that medicine and healing come from within, and that the only healer is the one who is healing. Everyone else, even doctors, are advisors, as I see it, guides, sharing knowledge from study and practice, and hopefully wisdom from their own experience, or their experience with others like you. So if a healer doesn't seem to practice what he or she is preaching, well, I send them loving wishes that they can find a healer who can support them in a healing journey, so that then they can support others effectively. Because I really find it important to really walk the path that we talk. And I've always felt that way in my career. And I think it's interesting because, Sovereign, maybe both you and I have gone through a transformational transition these last few weeks, because we've been talking so much about this. And I feel very confident in my own way of showing up throughout these last few weeks, when I just needed to take time to go within. And I won't speak for you, Sovereign, but if you want to share anything, just let me know. Oh, I can't hear you.
When we engage with the topics that any of us may want to explore, but the ones that we explored over the past, the first 4 or 5 that we did, they kind of required and also an embodiment and an engagement on an internal level. And it's like, well, it's nice that you have fantasies about relating to life in this way. How does that show up in your real full-on experience and engagement with it? And so it's been great to actually navigate the landscape of viral infection and all the stories, and going through the process of having a week long of fevers, and then having all sorts of bodily messaging going on that wasn't necessarily feeling very optimal, and then 2.5 weeks of severe brain fog and inability to think, and all that I'm doing is questioning the function. Like, what may this be about? Do I want to put it in a box? Oh, I had, covidiacy. I had that thing, and just to put a label on, well, does that work? No,
that's the technical name, yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been really good to kind of invocate with you the exploration, and then also weeks after having to navigate the actual bodily navigation that is like, well, all right, so you talked about it, now you can put it to the test.
Yeah, well, you talked about fevers, so your body was like, let's go. We're gonna we're going to put you to the test. So, all right. Well, thank you for sharing this bodily experience. Mine was more of, I'll share it another time, but let's dive into medicine. And I'm very happy that you shared how heroically you followed up your talk about fevers with facing one. Okay, so I would like to start with a clarification of how we came upon today's mainstream medical theories and practices. It's my opinion that doctors and nurses and even natural physicians are indoctrinated, trained and then regulated to remain in a tightly controlled, dogmatic, principle-poor paradigm within institutional education and practice. I just can't even tell you how much courage it takes, you guys, to say this, because I hold these thoughts and I rarely ever say them. So whatever transformation I went through the past few weeks gave me the courage to just say that. I have been playing nice with mainstream medicine for a really long time. I've talked in other videos about my conventional health background, and I have some very dear friends who are doctors and nurses and health administrators in hospitals. And no offense to any of you wonderful people who are engaging in the health field, doing the absolute best with what you were given to work with. Tonight, we're talking about the consciousness and the system, the paradigm that drives our medical system, natural and conventional. Okay, natural is not going untouched, unscathed in this conversation today. So here's what I would like to do. I'm going to do a little reading, and I want you guys to just kick back and relax. I'm reading from a beautiful book that was written by one of the amazing teachers who taught me about soil. It's called The Ecology of Care. She taught me about soil and regenerative solutions in agriculture and in life. And she was an acupuncturist and a homeopath. Acupuncture physician and a homeopath, and like me, her journey led her to soil, and now she's a soil advocate. So this one excerpt I feel provides a really nice summary, explaining how some very long-standing and effective forms of medicine are now hardly known at all and have been relegated to the myths and quackery pile. So you guys relax. I'm going to do some reading, okay? All right, so in the late 1800s, there was still as much diversity in the medical field as there is in the meadow behind my clinic. By the way, her name is Dee Dee Pursehouse. She's a lovely, wonderful person. So here she explains, medical providers included many types of doctors, eclectics, homeopaths, osteopaths, chiropractors, naturopaths, surgeons, and regular doctors, just to name a few, all on relatively equal footing. In addition, there were local herbalists, midwives, and parish nurses. Most of these practitioners viewed health and the human body in a holistic, systems-based way. Some hospitals and medical schools employed a variety of practitioners, all practicing under the same roof, while specialized schools and hospitals nourished particular niches of knowledge. So as an example, at the turn of the century, there were more than 20 homeopathic medical schools in the US and more than 100 homeopathic hospitals. Only a portion of doctors, and this is the turn of the 20th century, not the 21st, obviously. Only a portion of doctors were practicing the kind of medicine that looks at things through dissection and microscopes rather than a larger ecological view. Two streams, the germ theory of disease, which we discussed in our last conversation about infection, and a struggle for economic power and control, converged into a tidal wave that crashed over the medical landscape and swept all other views of health out to sea. It came to a head when a group of well-meaning but competitive doctors performed a radical surgery with a hatchet, not a scalpel, on the U.S. healthcare system in its youthful years. It removed a portion of our collective memory and altered the future of medicine in the United States. Now, I'm going to read on a bit, but this is an interesting analogy she brings up because, ironically, her grandfather was a premier, like a predominantly known neurosurgeon in the 50s when lobotomy procedures were being done, which was, is the stuff of my nightmares, frankly. But So that's why that's just kind of an interesting analogy there. But she went on to say that the homeopaths, who had been very popular with the general public because of the safety and low cost of their medicines, had just started a national association. This is the mid-19th century, by the way, so like mid-1800s. They had started a national association when, from which they launched attacks on regular doctors and their heroic methods, things like bloodletting, dangerous surgeries, and large doses of mercury and laxatives to treat nearly everything. In 1847, the regular doctors, in response, started the American Medical Association, creating a board to, quote, analyze quack remedies and enlighten the public in regard to the nature and danger of such remedies. Homeopaths, naturopaths, botanical practitioners, and other ecologically minded, quote, quacks were not allowed into the AMA. Regular doctors could lose their license even for consulting with them. The movement to consolidate professionals in order to have more power reflected a larger trend that was sweeping the nation: the corporation. Business models of efficiency run by experts were replacing personal values and personal choices of care. In the early 1900s, the American Medical Association took this opportunity to establish a council on medical education in order to, quote, upgrade medical education. The council's goal was to close half the medical schools, thus halving the number of graduates and creating a more respected, higher paid profession for physicians. So this is totally economics 101. Let's just slash supply to drive up demand, okay? Doctors in those days, by the way, were often paid less than mechanics. It was a laudable goal, except that it still had a hint of hostility in it, as well as more than a whiff of elitism. AMA members had been complaining bitterly that their profession was overcrowded and that they weren't getting enough respect or enough money because too many in their profession were of, quote, coarse and common fiber. In 1908, with funding from the Carnegie Foundation, the AMA's Council on Medical Education sent Abraham Flexner to do a survey of all U.S. medical schools and to provide a report on the quality of their teaching and other resources. 2 years earlier, the CME had already classified U.S. medical schools into three groups. A equaled acceptable, B equaled doubtful, and C equaled unacceptable. And they had shared this information with Flexner before he was hired to do this report. So basically, they bring in this guy to just decide which schools were legit and, reputable enough and which ones were not. And look what happened, okay? When Flexner's report was published, it quickly became the basis of the AMA's campaign to standardize medical education and close certain schools. Flexner recommended closing all of the nation's 151 medical schools except for 31. The AMA established in 1913 a propaganda department whose task was to gather and disseminate information concerning health fraud and quackery. Sound familiar? And by 1928, the propaganda department had been renamed Bureau of Investigation, a sharp signal to the remaining non-regular doctors that the AMA had clearly established itself without ever having gotten permission from the government as a national regulatory agency for the practice of medicine. Now, this segment of her book is basically about the establishment of what she calls the medical monoculture. And actually, Savram, would you mind just explaining that, just in case those of us who are not familiar with agriculture? Can you explain to us what monoculture is?
Yeah, monoculture is just a singular crop that is being farmed or grown. And the way that monoculture works, in order to have singular crops be effective in any fields, petrochemicals and industrial chemicals are required to create the foundational bases, NPK, which is nitrogen, phosphate, and calcium, to be there in the ground. And the downside of monoculture farming is that it also then requires to be sprayed with chemicals to keep bugs away, because you're basically creating a field of invitation for predatory creatures critters to come and disease, because it is very unnatural for nature to have singular crops existing. Only grasses are probably the only kind of consistent present plant species that will cover large areas. Vines and others will do the same to kind of cover the soil. But outside of that, nature is all about biodiversity. And so monoculture is one single crop culture, farming that is totally illogical if you look at how nature actually operates.
Yeah. So let's just keep that in mind, you guys. So monoculture essentially is growing, one crop at a time, and there are a cascade of negative effects that happen because it's really unnatural for that to happen. And the way in which that comes about on a farm is, really not by following nature, but by following profit or interest. And if you listen to this tale, it just goes to show the path of, or the elimination of biodiversity in the medical landscape. So I'm just going to finish up with a few other points because I think they're worth mentioning. So holistic and preventative forms of medicine were no longer taught in medical schools, and states began passing laws that prevented naturopathic and other non-regular physicians from practicing medicine. The mechanistic rather than ecological view of the body and reductionist laboratory science became the required basis of medical school curriculum and medical licensing exams. So today, when people walk around with t-shirts touting science, supporting their medical actions, this is the science that they're referring to. Basically, something that was this wide lens, eclectic lens, filled with all kinds of information and testing that then was narrowed into a keyhole. And now we're only allowed to look through this keyhole. Don't you dare look outside of that keyhole. Only the science that's looked at through this teeny little hole, that's the only science that counts. And the solutions that come from that tiny keyhole are the only solutions that are quote unquote safe or allowed. Okay. The combined result of all these changes made the next wave of doctors who went on to become the next wave of medical school professors, primarily white, wealthy, competitive men who excelled at linear thinking. Our current system, with all its marvelous progress and its quirky flaws, was designed, taught, and developed by them. So you guys, this is not in our generation. This is not even in our parents' generation. This is, for many of us, at least one, if not two or three generations back. So, when the author of this book is talking about essentially this group of doctors like performing a lobotomy on the populace and our awareness of medical options, this is why we feel like we're led to just so few things, and why we have absolutely no understanding or comprehension or even tolerance of difference. So anyway, just wanted to note that. And then last, I think she puts it beautifully. She closes it like this. So what went missing? What would our medical system look like if it had not been streamlined in the quest for higher profits? What would it look like if it had also been designed, taught, and developed by women, by people of color? And she goes on earlier to talk about how they closed, women's colleges. There were tons of women that were coming into the landscape of physicians and people of color as well, and people interested in a variety of holistic systems-based approaches. Even indigenous peoples with ancient wisdom and thousands of years of testing and trial of their methods were basically bleach cleansed out of this system. Or by people who had grown up in poor and working class households. They got rid of night school. You once were able to go to night school to become a physician. And so people who are working class and working full-time jobs were actually going to school to become healers with their background and experience coming from these areas that would have had representation and expression in the best practices. And those were also bleach cleansed from this system. Well, we only know part of that answer. Not like this. It wouldn't look like it looks today if there were biodiversity, and that's for sure. Okay, so now why do I care to bring this in, and why do I feel it's relevant? Because we can still compare medical practices of today with nature, but honestly, if it isn't clear already, do we even know anything about nature, our nature, the nature of healing? Because the conventional medical paradigm is really what's represented here. She kept using the term regular doctors, but I feel regularly frustrated because I work in the natural health field now. I am a homeopath, so that's technically considered a natural medicine. But even within my own field, whether it's alternative medicine, natural medicine, even in homeopathy, I see the echoes of this medical monoculture infiltrating and stomping out biodiversity. And there's 5 failures in the mainstream medical paradigm. And if you don't mind, unless you have some thoughts to share, Sovereign, I'm going to share where I feel. Okay. So here are the 5 failures I feel in mainstream medical paradigm, alternative and conventional, that complicate and confuse the healing process. Here's number 1. Failure to grasp the basic understanding that the body has an inherent ability to heal itself, and the relationship between thought and form, in other words, energy and matter, that determine the trajectory of an innate healing process. Number 2 is failure to perceive that symptoms of an illness are signs of unhealthy attitudes and beliefs that condense into matter. You guys, how many years have we been told stress is the major killer out there? And where does stress occur? It's on the level of perception. It's perception of environment, and it's in exchange between a feedback loop between what we perceive, what we create in our environment, and what feeds back to us. And that we know, even our mainstream medical paradigm has been touting stress as a major killer and major cause of disease. And what's interesting is that this whole idea of energy to matter, this is a well-defined, well-demonstrated scientific concept in the quantum sciences, and has not been adequately applied or expressed through the mainstream medical paradigm. And but that is science. It's scientifically supported. This is something that doesn't get brought into the doctor's office when you go and share your symptoms. As I see it, symptoms are signs that tell us that changes need to be made, that something is throwing us out of balance, and our internal healer is working to self-correct. The symptoms are just the sign of that self-correction. Number 3, failure to apply gentle and nature-guided healing efforts instead of forcefully suppressing these symptoms. We keep coming up with new names for symptom patterns as diseases, segmenting them from a person, and then recommending the person go to war with them as though they were some kind of an external predator or threat, discounting the power of that patient who is the actual healer. Number 4, failure to understand that this kind of suppression drives the problem deeper into organs and tissues. So when we try to rid ourselves of the symptoms, the uncomfortable allergies or the cold and flu, even a skin infection, when we try to just silence it, the steroids, the antibiotics, whatever suppressive medication you want to use, even just an emotional suppression. Oh, it's in your head. You know how many women I support who were told that their disease state, that they're, autoimmune, their body's going crazy, and it's all in your head. It's psychosomatic. And meanwhile, it's all in your head. Well, that's powerful. If we understand the quantum universe, that is incredibly powerful. Everything starts as thought form, right? So, but what the amazing phenomena in the body is that you suppress it and it drives it deeper into the organs and tissues, only to emerge later as a seemingly new and more intense condition, while the patient's body becomes more and more damaged, congested, and depleted of its self-healing energy. And the mental and emotional disturbances that were on the level of cause, theoretically, and if we're to explore quantum theory, really everything starts on that energetic level, well, then those remain unhealed, unheard, unsupported, and they continue to drive the problem. And lastly, number 5, the misconception, and we've gone over this, we'll go over it again, I'm sure, and again, that bacteria, viruses, and other germs are invasive, opportunistic organisms that must be squashed and stomped into submission. These old stories of bacterial bad guys and viral villains and the endless stream of specific disease diagnoses, they continue to flood both the conventional and the natural medical scenes. Functional medicine, it's not immune to this same exact phenomenon. So how can any of these healing methods, how can these forms of medicine be syntropic? I don't know about you, but it feels like it's time for like a moratorium on the whole germs cause a disease thing. I mean, I see it every day, and I know that that's probably my reticular activation system, the pattern recognition system in my brain, just hearing it and seeing it from all ends. And, you know, even if it's herbs, you guys, if we're touting an herb because it's antimicrobial and we're taking high doses of something that is a biocide, so it comes from nature and it's a plant, but it's still in concentration meant to kill something. How is that exactly a different action just because it's not, you know, conjured up by a pharmaceutical company? And who's to say, you know, that isn't also driving that recommendation? So, you know, antimicrobial approaches to medicine is like waging a war against the self, as we discussed in our germs talk. And not at all ironically, autoimmune diseases, the nature of which are confusing, and, you know, the confusion and this attack of our own cells, those conditions really mirror the consequences of our acute health strategy. And in homeopathy, homeopaths are taught most chronic illness is just improperly healed acute illness. So, before I keep going, Sovereign, any wisdom you want to share there?
Yeah, it is. It brings about a sense of sadness to my cells when I really feel into the depth of the distortion and how far of the natural order we strayed. And I call it human damage. You know, it's grown-ups practicing fantasies as if it is a reality without comprehending that it isn't a reality. And so we are engaged in an entropic way, stomping out biodiversity for the sake of, you know, mere sake of power, control, profits, and the expansion of empire. And so this is the same patriarchal, empirical, empire-based. It's the damage of man.
Strategy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one that is being lived out through our human culture, but it's predominantly been the Western culture. And I read through the successions, and as I feel into this, it's just like, wow, gosh, there's a sadness that I still feel, a kind of grieving in the recognition that this stomping out of biodiversity is what seems to be having the overtone. And now we are in the third or fourth generation raised inside of a cultured ecology, a programming that doesn't necessarily have strong ties to what was still there 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And that biodiversity has been, you know, quagmired, and it has been named all of these things. And I see that appearing in so many different aspects of Western society, where the natural, the intrinsic, the innate, look at the birthing culture. It is absolutely shocking what humans have co-created together. And I'm really grateful to be able to feel kind of my own feelings and emotions in that, because I do find a strength from within to be more, not so much convicted in my own awareness, but to come into it with even more love, because that's really what it's requiring. How can I find not just the understanding of how did we get here, but also the compassion of the acceptance that this is where we are. And then with that, being able to foster and be an assistant and being a supporting agent to others, to remembering the innate, the syntropic, the the beautiful life ways that we can engage with. So yeah, I'm very grateful to just be receiving all of that and feeling my own feelings in the process.
Beautiful. And I love that you shared how you're processing, because I hesitated for such a long time to talk about this because for a while I was on the learning about love versus fear, right? So not fear as kind of like the flip side of the love coin, but that fear was like bad and all the emotions having to do with fear were bad. And so just focus on love, just focus on the light. Don't focus on the bad. And not that I'm throwing focus or energy there, but what I've realized is that I'm not upset. I've come to accept all of the individuals and groups and institutions that are involved in the creation of this. Because if we're really to be syntropic in this medical monoculture and the formation of it and the industrialization of medicine along with agriculture and all, everything else, it was serving such an important function with purpose. But if we don't look at that and we don't see what it means for us personally, for each and every person watching this, for me, for you, for us to individually just feel into how it feels to know that, and then to re-engage with the awareness of our power. Because this is powered by us. We can say that it's implemented by them or they or whoever that is. And that's not my expertise to try to play the blame game. It's just because I have a dear friend who's the CEO of a huge hospital system here in Florida. We're having a conversation, later this week. I love healers of all kinds. I love you doctors. I love you nurses. I love you, hospital administrators. I have compassion for this diseased, principle poor system that has, just narrowed our view, has told us stories as though they're truth, as though they're hard and fast science. And then, all of you just act based on that. Of course, that's understandable. I have compassion for that. But if any one of us who is watching this has the ability to tap into and feel into your heart, feel into your courage, and let's talk about what this means for us. Because for me, when I received this information, I realized, what, I do need to look at this, because I want to see what aligns. I want to see if I'm showing up when healing myself, when healing my family, when supporting others, if I'm showing up in a way that aligns with a new paradigm, where we bring back in the ancient wisdom, but we even create new, and where we allow. I'm on this Facebook group called Natural Mamas of the Palm Beaches, and it's lovely. And actually, I believe a friend, she's a doula who started it. But it's really interesting to see mostly, mothers interact on there, women interacting, and some are just so incredibly benevolent in giving advice and offering options to other mothers who are struggling with their own, child or their own personal health. But then I also will see in the comments other mothers who will warn and caution and almost admonish and, scold those who are, offering up a potential homeopathic remedy, especially with homeopathy. It's really interesting because homeopathy is an energy medicine, and it's one of the most gentle, as you heard in that story. One of the reasons why it was so popular was because it was affordable and because it was gentle. But they come in and they attack and they say, you have to be really careful making those recommendations. And what's so interesting is, while I appreciate their care in saying that, because I truly believe that their intentions are in a lovely place, you discount the power of the mother. That mother went on a Facebook page. She asked for opinions. She received them. Now honor her own internal wisdom, her ability to tap into her own intuition to see what is useful and what isn't. Why do we have to censor at all? Why do we have to deem knowledge as dangerous? It's just, it really kind of parallels the political censorship going on and all of that. I mean, I'm really not all that tuned in, as I've said before, to news media, but I've been censored my fair share. Sovereign, I know you have. And it's just so interesting, because here we are, we're like the Let's have the love hour. We're talking Syntropy, and here we're getting like, don't watch it, disinformation. Like it's just what kind of silliness are we engaging in, you guys? I really truly think that if we're going to shift and we're going to invite in more, more peace and prosperity, whether it's in wealth or health, it's going to take our own journeys, just showing up for ourselves and saying, okay, am I still barking the same thing about your kid coughed on my kid and passed on this virus or this bacteria? I mean, that's okay if you are and you haven't watched this, but if you have, maybe we can have a talk one time and see what can be brought into harmony there, because there is more to that discussion. I'm not saying I'm not a believer in contagion. I actually think that contagion happens all over all the time and is energetic. I don't think it takes a droplet containing some poor scapegoat microbe to infect somebody. I think, we're all influencing one another. All of us have stepped into a room with an energy vampire and had, the life kind of sucked out of us. And we've all been around somebody with good vibes and felt the benefit of that, right? So contagion, and actually, if you just go on PubMed.gov, like search emotional contagion, there's tons of studies that show how contagious emotion is, right? So I don't think, maybe our way of relating to contagion is actually disconnecting us from truth, in my opinion, but also from one another, from ourselves, and from solutions, from an entire diverse, beautiful forest worth of solutions. So there's my rant.
So brilliant. Yeah. We're up against something that is can seem to some of the people that listen to this insurmountable. We're up against big medical associations that are all driven by power infrastructure that has so much capital. Just on the notion of training in that area. There's about 7 hours on nutrition that a medical doctor will receive during the course of his medical training, which can be up to 5-7 years. And so that's an interesting component that has been cut out almost of the entire that particular strand of medicine practice. And to me, it can feel a little bit daunting, as if we're at the behest of some external authority or an external power, and the government is working closely together because these associations have grown over the years and mastered the art of becoming the most significant one. But for me, a lot of this is about sovereignty and coming back to self, and then feeling into, wow, I'm giving a lot of energy out to the powers that be, and that I'm at the behest of their decision-making process. And it's like totally making me forget about me, that I am in charge of my decisions. But then I feel the disempowerment of not having been brought up with all this natural awareness, and that I've actually been programmed in a totally different orientation. And then I go again into some sort of like disempowered state of beingness that doesn't allow me to access that which is my own inner resource and my own inner field of knowing. And that is what I feel that we are really benefiting, cultivating, and re-inspiring others to start re-engaging and trusting in that the cells know, that the cells are carrying messages, that the cells are communicating, and that a headache is not necessarily a bad thing. You may want to take an aspirin if it's really bad, because your pain sensors, but maybe you just benefit drinking a liter of water to rehydrate the cells. And so how can we relate to our own bodily messaging? And also when we are parents and we have children and we witness, how can we re-inform and re-educate ourselves as to what we can do, as opposed to outsourcing and relinquishing our own decision-making capacity, and feeling disempowered maybe from having access to resources. We have a worldwide web of resources, and all we have to do is include natural remedy or natural solution or natural something something. And if we just insert the word natural again into how we orientate ourselves to the world around us and the diseases or the discomforts that we may come across, we may find that it is all there. It's just not actively put on billboards. It's not put on advertisement campaigns, and it's not put on Facebook ads necessarily.
Well, and I would, one little point that I would disagree with you is on the searching on the World Wide Web, because that is also funneled through a keyhole, isn't it? Right. So when you search these things, I actually believe, what did we just say about energy? Right. And this is kind of, I'm really feeling that next week, maybe, or next time, we're gonna talk a little bit about symptoms, because I want to hear more of what you, even just that little aspirin and water comparison. I'd love to share more with you guys if you're like, all right, Marissa, so then nothing that I think that I know about healing is helpful to me and supportive. So then what do I do? You know, what do I do? What do I do with this? And welcome to my world. Like, I've literally dedicated my life to this, and this is what I do. And I think that the answer that I have, or the answers that I have, they're not going to be like specific prescriptions for you, but they're going to cue you in on at least where to go with your relationship with those symptoms, how you even can feel into what their meaning is, because it's a language, and it's one that is worth learning, so that not through somebody else's kind of artificial slant, because there's lots of interpretations. I mean, there are times I had a skin thing and, read an article and it was like, oh, that's a vitamin A deficiency. And I took tons of vitamin A, or just like ate a whole bunch of liver and like that. I mean, that's just not that's more of a functional medicine route. That's definitely not my area. I'm talking about like energy medicine. There is such wisdom that comes from nature that doesn't necessarily just come in a capsule with some moringa powder in it. And I'm not saying I love moringa, but you know what I mean? Like this is about how to feel into a new perspective on symptoms, that you are not your disease, but your disease is not, it's not at war with you. And when we can relinquish the fight, and when we can start learning how to listen, how to be curious, it's just, I absolutely agree with you, Sovereign. A landscape of opportunities come up, and I truly believe the universe brings you exactly the healer that you need to learn from. And if you don't trust yourself and you're petrified that somebody is going to mislead you, well, probably that kind of a snake oil person will enter into your path, and he or she will be performing a function with purpose. And, maybe don't jump so quickly into taking something that somebody, especially something that is a physical substance that somebody tells you to take, or the long copy ad tells you to take. So there's brilliant healing out there. I absolutely agree with it. I don't know about it through a general, internet search, but I believe that will be drawn to you if you connect within to this journey of personal exploration and just shifting the relationship with symptoms. If we're into natural health and we don't really believe the stories you've been told about, over the last 2 years, great. But have you evolved your consciousness and perspective? Have you evolved towards what this older landscape, 200 plus, and, going back thousands of years, what that wisdom, can offer you? Because those answers, as you so beautifully said, Sovereign, are within the cells if we learn how to listen to them. And at one point, if that sentence came out of my mouth in my life, I would have been like, who is this girl saying, listen to your cells? What? But I'm saying that.
So great, Marissa. Yeah, no,
Right.
I love that. And one thing that I want to sort of add to that from my own, it's something for people to take away from this. So where do I start then? Is maybe start becoming curious where you have judgment. So you may have an ailment, or whatever you want to call it. You're not feeling nice. Have you explored Chinese herbal medicinal approach? Have you looked at acupuncture? Have you looked at that Eastern philosophical orientation towards the body, and maybe other natural ways of relating to something that you've had maybe a more an industrial medical approach to cut it out, kill it, destroy it, and to start maybe questioning where you have judgments on natural or natural healing modalities, whatever they are, and just to
Right.
question, like, is that even true? Because that's where I found a lot of my resolutions, is that I was actually so jaded because of my programming in a monoculture towards the natural world, that once I started exploring the natural world, I was kind of like, nah, it's just, and I was staying in my program box.
Yeah.
And so then I had to kind of explore, like, why am I even judgmental on these? And guess what I called these people? Quackmires. Well, I thought maybe I should look up where that term comes from. Well, I think it was J.D. Rockefeller who came up with that one. So this is,
Well, there you go. Oh,
it's
so many
we're
stories to tell, right?
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so can we do symptoms next time, Sovereign?
Symptoms it is.
Symptoms, and then I would love to maybe cap this off if it feels like time, because we had talked about doing this as a health series, so that because there are other topical societal views that can be run through Syntropy, but I also really want to talk about the idea of cure. So I think symptoms will be next, and then I really am looking forward to tackling cure and what nature has to say about it. But we brought in nature's perspective with this idea of biodiversity, and if there's any takeaway, that would be the one, that if we're really going to be looking at what is asking to be healed within our perspectives and principles, I would say that it's taking a good look at how you feel about when you hear that the body heals itself and that it's a self-healing mechanism. And I'm not saying it's not helped by guidance and that we don't partake in that, just like a forest system needing to heal and needing humans to come in as stewards of that process, right? But you know, that it's only really monoculture where chemical inputs and suppression and those kinds of patterns and toxicity really come into play. That in a biodiverse system, it heals itself with just some care and listening. And then also just this idea of again, the serving a function with purpose. That if we can give ourselves permission and space to see that whatever challenge, there is a gift there. There is an opportunity there. And I think you said it earlier, Sovereign, that it's not always easy to see when you're evaluating it and you're in it. You're in the brain fog, fever. You had like the brain cloud. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Joe versus the Volcano, but I think of that, like you have a brain cloud. Anyway, worth watching if you haven't seen it. But anyway, this seeing the function comes even later when the suffering has diminished a little bit. You'll see it, and then you can walk a path and you strengthen, just like a forest system we mentioned a few talks back goes through a disease state, and then it upgrades and updates itself, and it cleans out what isn't working, and it regenerates what it needs. And you know, just it took me a while to trust my body to do that, and I will tell you that is a hero's journey right there, and it's a worthy one. So should we end on that note?
Yes, the hero's journey. I am totally with you on that. Having just gone through it for a month's time. Thank you so much, Marissa. These conversations are very valuable, and I'm so glad that you're initiating them.
Thank you, and thank you guys for hanging in this late with us, and we'll see you next time.
Yay. Ciao.